Welcome back to the final installment of this eBay kit review, and if you haven't seen the first two parts, you should probably do that before this, unless you just like doing things out of order. But anyway, I decided to put some of this Minwax tung oil finish on the body while I am moving on to the headstock and putting some tuners in there. As a reminder, I am using all of the hardware that came with the kit, so these tuners did come with it. Just make sure that you put the left ones on the left side and the right ones on the right side. They do have pre-drilled pilot holes on the back, but I do hand tighten the nut on the top of these to kind of hold these in place so that when I flip it over, it's all there, and then I just use a screwdriver, obviously, to put the screws in the back. They lined up really well, look really good, and then when I got these tightened, I just flipped it over and then used a socket to tighten the nut from the front side of the headstock. This gave that Minwax tung oil finish just enough time to get good and tacky, and so I grabbed my buffer and then just buff all of the sticky stuff off of it to a pretty nice sheen. Once I get this finished, it is time to start installing the bridge and tailpiece, and they come with these ferrules that are, pre-drilled and everything. What I do is when I set them in there, I just put a block of wood on top of it and then just lightly, slightly more than very lightly, tap that down with a hammer, and I'm doing that obviously to protect any kind of finish that might happen. You don't want to just start slinging a metal hammer at your brand new guitar that you've just built. But anyway, this is pretty self-explanatory. I will say that right here I messed up, obviously, because you're supposed to slip a ground wire into this back tailpiece post, and I didn't know that. To me, it just made sense that you put all the hardware on and then electronics, but you apparently have to do that at the same time so you can ground everything properly. For the electronics, I did go to guitarfetish.com and I ordered their pre-wired, pre-soldered kit for 2 humbuckers with just a volume, tone, and 3-position switch. And since it comes with an input jack, I just robbed the cover from the input jack that came with the original kit. And then I actually did use the guitar cable that came with the original kit, but just to get the input jack through this hole. It does have 2 nuts here for adjustability. The inside nut you just kind of twist until it comes out as far as you want to, and then, just put the outside nut on there to tighten everything down. Of course, there's just 4 screws that hold that plate to the body, and then that's pretty much all there is to that. And just a tip, in case you didn't already know, the way that you can tell the volume from the tone knob is the tone knob has a little capacitor soldered to it, and that's what creates like resistance or something. I don't know. That's how tone works. These posts did not quite want to go through the factory holes, so I just had to drill out, basically nothing to make the hole big enough for them to come through. But at any rate, that's not too big of a deal, and then they just push through just like they're supposed to. What was kind of a big deal is there was so little slack between the 2 pots that because of the spacing of the hole, it basically did not want to go in there. There was not enough room between the volume and the tone with everything that was there. My workaround for that was to pull these back out and use a Dremel to kind of make a channel where all the stuff that can still go down is. However, my bits didn't fit my Dremel for whatever reason, so I had to use a drill and just kind of go nice and slow here, chip away at this, and then when I get to where I can angle the drill, I go all the way through. It's a process, but just take your time. It'll be fine. The best thing to do would probably use a router or a Dremel with the bits that work. But when you get all that sawdust in there, if you don't want to just like dump it out all over your wife's kitchen table, you can take some painter's tape and roll it inside out and then pick that up with the sticky stuff. And then I just hold all of these wires off to the side with more painter's tape that isn't covered in sawdust. Everything kind of just comes up where it's supposed to be, and then you can just hand tighten these and make sure everything's going good. The kind of wonky thing, and I'm sure it's because of the way it's routed, is there is a gap because it's an arch top, and I'm assuming it was routed flat instead of being perpendicular to the outside, the finish. I also robbed the pickup covers off of the pickups that came with this guitar kit so that I can use them for this kit. These are wax potted pickups, so there's wax in it. I had just knocked that out of the screw hole with a safety pin, and then if you're having issues setting that spring in there with it because it's longer than the screw, I just started it with like a knot of dental floss so that it was shorter, and then just cut that out later. This is pretty awesome from Guitar Fetish. These are like Quick Plug, I think is the name that they use for this. It's literally like a headphone jack that plugs into your pickups. So if you ever want to go back and like swap pickups out, it's just no soldering at all. You just pull that plug out and stick it back in, and then they go in super easy, and it's fantastic, brilliant idea on their part. These are Guitar Fetish's Classic 2, they're Alnico 2 pickups, and they are obviously paired neck and bridge. They are all labeled in their box, so kind of make sure that you've got that. If you can't remember, the shipping information that comes with it also has that. And here was my workaround for that ground. I just took the ground wire and then put it around the post for the bridge instead of back in the tailpiece like it should have been. It's kind of fine, I guess. You can notice it obviously from the front because there's a little bitty piece of black wire right there, but it worked. I also used the strings that come with it just for the initial setup here, and obviously that's, you know, gonna get cut off, so it wasn't that big a deal. On your neck, the easiest way to do this to see if it's straight is to put a capo on the first fret, hold the last fret, and then just kind of tap each fret. And if it moves around, if there's a gap, it means that there's space between the string and the fretboard, like there kind of should be a little bit. But if it doesn't, it means that there's back bow in the neck, and you should back the truss rod off. That would be moving it to the left so that the neck can relax some and take some of that back bow out. And then obviously if there's a massive gap between the string and the fretboard when you do this, the truss rod needs to be tightened to kind of bow it back a little bit. Just be careful going either direction. You should only make about a quarter turn adjustments before you check. Now, checking and setting up the intonation is also pretty easy. You're just going to tune your string to, you know, perfection. If you had a tuner that measured in cents, it would probably be better, but you just want to measure it tuned and then make sure that it's exactly the same tuning at the 12th fret. And then you can just adjust your bridge here. I put this in backwards probably, but I thought that it would be easier to work a screwdriver over the pickup rather than the tailpiece. It's probably all about the same, but regardless, if you're sharp at the 12th fret and you're perfect open, your scale needs to be longer, so you'll back that screw off so that that piece moves further out. And if you are flat, it needs to be shorter, so you'll tighten it up and bring it closer. Just think about how the scale length is. Flat needs to be shorter and sharp needs to be longer. The action's a little higher than I wanted it to be, and I'm out of adjustment on that bridge, so I'm going to back this tailpiece off to just release a little bit of tension, and then it's up high enough that I can slide this bridge out without having to take the strings completely off. I'm choosing to make modifications to this bridge specifically instead of the guitar, because if I screw this up, I can just buy a new bridge and put on here, but if I screw the guitar up, well, it's screwed up. But anyway, I go over to the grinder and just start taking material off the bottom so that the bridge will sit lower on those posts and therefore lowering the action. Just go really slow with this. It's going to get hot if you're doing this, so probably either wear gloves or hold it with a rag like I'm doing here. Also make note that there is a retaining spring that goes across to hold those intonation setting screws, so be careful not to go that deep into the bridge. At any rate, it's pretty easy as long as you're halfway paying attention. And then once I get everything close to where I want it on the grinder, I move over to a file and just kind of clean everything up, flatten it all out, and then knock any burrs off of the edge. There's also going to be some burrs that are inside the hole here, so I take a 3/16 bolt and then just kind of force it through and then run it back and forth to kind of smooth those out. It's not too big of a deal. And then I couldn't do this again if I tried, but somehow I eyeballed this within 1/10 of a millimeter. I don't know what it was to start with, but at any rate, it was 7.9 on that side and 8.0 on this side. And like I said, it was just a happy little accident. And we're just going to reinstall everything and tighten things back down, tune this up, check intonation again. Then I'll show you a pretty cool trick that you can check your action with just a couple of guitar picks. So if you know how thick your guitar picks are, that's great, but I didn't, but I have a micrometer, so it's not a big deal. And if you will take 2 guitar picks and stack them together, you'll get a measurement. And then if it will go under the string without touching it, obviously the action is higher than that measurement. So I stack another guitar pick on top of that, measure it, and lo and behold, it will not go under there. So for me, for instance, I know that the action on my low string is somewhere between 1.3 and 2.3. I also know that the high side of my string is roughly 1.3 because those picks will barely go in there. If you do remember, I did build this for my 11-year-old daughter, so weight was in mind, and I didn't know how else to weigh it. I'm sure I could have bought a scale, but I had a bathroom scale, so I just stepped on the scale, then picked up the guitar and stepped on the scale again. And a 6.6 solid mahogany body guitar sounds like a pretty big win to me. I then grabbed a blowtorch and some clothes hangers and did a terrible attempt at burning an F into the headstock, but it looks alright. I guess it's not the worst thing I've ever done. And if you're asking, hey man, how does it sound? Well, you've actually been listening to it for quite some time. As a matter of fact, since you've seen the pickups on the screen, that's been the background music. I had a friend record a track for me just for this video, and I think it came out great, and it looks fantastic. Thanks for watching, guys. Really hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that subscribe button. This will not be the last guitar video I make.